The genius who exposed Konoha's dark secret. Please subscribe. Episode 1. Set a goal first, then escape Konoha. As a transmigrator, Chiba Shiraishi believed that he should possess the fundamental qualities as one. His most important task currently was to remain calm and assimilate into this new world as quickly as possible. Although there were several illogical phenomena in this world, witnessing individuals leaping across rooftops or summoning animals, walking on walls, Shiraishi had been astonished by these surreal fantasy scenes more than once. What sort of magical world was this? Was everyone here Superman? Because in the village of Konoha alone, there were countless superhumans like them. Shiraishi came to realize that these superhuman beings were referred to as ninja. They possessed a special energy called Chakra, which grants them enhanced strength, incredible jumping abilities, and manipulating various elements. After a few days of adjustment, Shiraishi finally understood the fact that he had arrived in an extraordinary world. He had gained a thorough understanding of his current identity. The previous owner of his body had been an orphan in Konoha, growing up in the village's orphanage for several years. Only recently, on his 6th birthday, he had been identified as having the qualifications to become a shinobi, and he left the orphanage to live on his own in an apartment. Shiraishi felt endless complaints about the day he left the orphanage, which coincided with the day he transmigrated. What orphanage kicks out a child who was merely 6 years old? According to the information provided by the orphanage, his parents had died on the battlefield shortly after his birth. They were both under the age of 20 when they perished, and their remains had not been found. Only their names were etched coldly on the memorial monument. Therefore, after becoming a hero, Shiraishi received numerous conveniences in life from the upper echelons of the village. After leaving the orphanage, the entrance fee for the ninja academy was waived, and he received a monthly stipend, including the inheritance left by his parents. From his perspective alone, Shiraishi believed that Konoha showed a touch of humanity. However, one must consider everything from a comprehensive viewpoint. Over the past few days, he had repeatedly heard gossip on the streets of Konoha village. He reached a terrifying conclusion. Every official ninja, regardless of age, was required to go to the battlefield to fight against the enemy as arranged by the village's higher-ups. From Shiraishi's knowledge, since the Second Ninja World War was currently taking place, Konoha sent a large number of children under the age of 10 to the battlefield each year. Under 10 years old? Children on the battlefield? This wasn't a joke. Right? Do they really send children under the age of 10 to the battlefield? There were even rumors of 6 or 7-year-old children who graduated early from the academy due to their exceptional abilities, and were subsequently sent directly to the battlefield. Feeling lost and uncertain, Shiraishi's heart was immediately filled with hesitation. How dire was the situation on the front lines of Konoha for them to involve children under the age of 12 in battle? Are they out of their minds? Could Konoha actually be a terrorist organization? Had he unwittingly entered a terrorist organization? Contemplating this possibility, Shiraishi stared at the academy admission notice in his hand, his eyes filled with a complex expression as he slumped onto the ground. It's over. He must have joined a terrorist organization. Once enrolled in the academy, he would not only be taught various terrifying killing techniques, but would also be brainwashed, becoming a tool of murder for the village's upper class. Shiraishi's speed was remarkable, and each strike carried considerable force, evident from the collision between his limbs and the stakes. His face remained composed, his breathing steady. While striking the stakes, he synchronized his breathing, aiming to preserve his physical stamina while maintaining considerable speed and power. Lost in this selfless practice, Shiraishi's ears suddenly caught the piercing sound of the air being cut. He quickly reacted as a kunai whizzed past, narrowly avoiding an unexpected attack. Frowning, Shiraishi peered into the depths of the woods. It was now past 8 in the evening, and only the faint moonlight dimly illuminated the darker areas of the woods, rendering visibility poor. A figure emerged from the darkness, a short individual with long black hair fluttering in the evening breeze. Their dark pupils shone exceptionally bright. The intense gaze sent a surge of tension through Shiraishi's nerves. This person was none other than his classmate, Uchiha Ruri. Shaking his head, Shiraishi greeted her with a relaxed smile on his face. It's you, classmate Ruri. What brings you here so late? To be honest, I felt a bit frustrated by my quick defeat against you today, so I came here. Before he could finish his sentence, Ruri coldly interrupted, Fight me with all your strength. Huh? All my strength? Well, during the day, I did give it my all. Shiraishi stuttered, struggling to comprehend the meaning behind Ruri's words. I said, use all your strength. Ruri, what are you talking about? Seeing Shiraishi's feigned confusion, Ruri's icy expression revealed a trace of impatience. She withdrew a kunai from her pouch and pressed it against Shiraishi's neck without hesitation. Unlike the wooden training tools used during the day, Ruri wielded a lethal weapon capable of easily severing Shiraishi's throat. What made the situation more terrifying was Ruri's speed. Shiraishi's heart raced, knowing he couldn't afford to be careless. Swiftly, he raised his own kunai, blocking Ruri's attack, causing a spark to ignite upon contact. Two pairs of silent, pitch-black eyes pierced through the nighttime air, locked in a serious gaze. "Ruri-san, were you planning to kill me just now?" "Humph." Unyielding as ever, Ruri's long black hair danced in the moonlight, providing her with cover as she launched another kunai towards Shiraishi's heart from a dangerous angle. Shiraishi barely managed to block it before swiftly creating distance between them. His expression grew increasingly solemn. In that moment, Shiraishi realized that his speed and strength were on par with Ruri's. However, Ruri possessed far more combat experience, and it was this difference that led Shiraishi to understand his slim chances of victory. Thankfully, after a brief test, Ruri chose not to continue her assault. She shot Shiraishi a peculiar look, the arrogance fading from her face as she asked, "It's strange. You're clearly strong, so why do you deliberately conceal your true abilities?" Answering this question was not easy, and Shiraishi couldn't find a suitable lie to convince Ruri. Thus, silence filled the air. Just as Shiraishi racked his brain for a response, Ruri spoke again, "Forget it. Now that I know you're hiding your strength, I've achieved my goal. I'm leaving." With those words, Ruri departed without looking back, resolute in her decision. "What an unusual girl," Shiraishi murmured. Did she intend to expose his hidden strength? If that were the case, it could lead to significant trouble. Considering Ruri's nature, she was unlikely to meddle in his affairs. With that thought, Shiraishi felt a wave of relief wash over him. However, this encounter served as a reminder that even a child possessed the ability to see through him. Even someone like Chunin-level head teacher Fujimura Taiga failed to realize it. Shiraishi understood one thing: never underestimate a ninja, regardless of their age. He resolved to exercise greater caution in the future. Episode 6. The Birth of the Queen of Gluttony. "Good morning, Ruri." Shiraishi greeted Ruri as usual. However, this time Ruri turned her head to look at him, nodded, and responded. Shiraishi's face showed a slight surprise. He thought that Ruri would ignore his greetings just like before. Could it be that she acknowledged his strength and that's why she responded? After all, when Ruri introduced herself, she made it clear that she didn't plan to associate with weaklings. In other words, Ruri only acknowledges powerful individuals and probably doesn't care about greeting the weak. It's such a simplistic and rude code of conduct. "Well, about what happened last night, can you?" Shiraishi looked a little embarrassed but continued talking to Ruri with a pleasing smile. Ruri glanced at Shiraishi and said, "I see. I won't say anything. I'll keep this secret for you. But on the other hand, if I have a training requirement, you can't postpone it." Shiraishi breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. "Of course, I'd be happy to help." Soon, Hyuga Ayane, who sat at the same table on the other side, arrived. After greeting Shiraishi, she sat down and started talking to the girl at the front table. The class bell rang. The first class of the day was a MLM brainwashing class. This class aimed to spread the so-called Will of Fire. Shiraishi took out the book The First Hokage and the Will of Fire. He felt that this kind of class was pure torture for him, but he had to make an effort to listen. He had to conceal his true thoughts in order to be politically correct. Not long after, Shiraishi felt a finger poking his right arm. He turned his head and saw Ruri pretending to listen attentively. Then he lowered his head and saw a piece of paper with writing on it. It said, "Do you hate this course?" Shiraishi took out a note, thought for a moment, and replied to Ruri. "No, I think Fujimura-sensei explained it very well. I also aspire to inherit the Will of Fire from the first Homage-sama and become a great Konoha ninja." Ruri turned her head and glared at Shiraishi in dissatisfaction. She immediately saw through Shiraishi's lie. "When you opened the book The First Hokage and the Will of Fire on the first day of the academy, I noticed that your expression was off. Are you scared or worried about something?" "I had a stomachache that day because I ate expired bread, so my face didn't look good." Liar. "I remember on that day of the academy, didn't you tell Ayane that you had a stomachache after drinking expired milk?" Shiraishi felt embarrassed. He didn't even remember that, but Ruri did. "It's true, I never lie. You are someone I recognize, so I will keep your secret." The two continued passing notes back and forth, and Shiraishi found that chatting with Ruri was more interesting than listening to this MLM class. At that moment, his left arm was lightly poked by a finger. Shiraishi turned his head and found that it was Ayane. Like Ruri, she pretended to listen attentively and handed him a small note. What are you talking about? It seemed that she was very interested in joining the conversation between Shiraishi and Ruri. Shiraishi thought for a moment, then tore off a piece of paper and replied. We were talking about the newly opened Ichiraka ramen shop in the village. The ramen there is delicious. After Ayane received the note, she wrote another sentence in response. Is it about ramen? I also know about it. The ramen there is really good, even though it's a new shop. Shiraishi-kun, let's eat there together after class. Okay. Shiraishi didn't think too much about it. He wrote the words on a note and passed it to Ruri. Ruri-san, let's go to the ramen shop together after class this afternoon. The ramen there is delicious, and Ayane-san will be joining us. Sure, why not? Casually agreeing. Shiraishi nodded. Meanwhile, their homeroom teacher, Fujimura Taiga, who was giving a serious lecture at the podium, looked at Shiraishi and the other two girls with a hint of helplessness. Did they think he was blind? Seeing them passing notes and whispering happily, Fujimura Taiga reached his limit. Hey, you three, stop passing notes secretly and go stand outside while you listen to the teaching. He didn't want the top students to think they could do whatever they wanted in class. Fujimura Taiga felt the need to assert his authority as their teacher. These kids these days are too arrogant. He has to discipline them. The three of them didn't resist and went outside to stand. I thought I was being discreet, thinking Fujimura-sensei wouldn't notice, but I didn't expect to be caught, Ayane said with a helpless smile, realizing her earlier naive mindset. Ruri commented nonchalantly, I thought he wouldn't care when he saw us. He's just a chunin in his 20s. It makes me question the quality of education at the academy. In Ruri's eyes, the three geniuses could do as they pleased in class. It was the unique privilege of being a genius. Shiraishi. Come on, you two, that's enough. Do you really think Fujimura-sensei couldn't hear you outside? He didn't anticipate that Ayane, who was usually honest and quiet, had a mischievous side as well. Ichiraka ramen shop. This was a recently opened ramen shop in Konoha. Although the business didn't seem to be very popular yet, Shiraishi was deeply drawn to the delicious ramen he had tried there. It was only a matter of time before it became popular. I'll treat you all tonight. Eat as much as you want. After class in the afternoon, Shiraishi took Ayane and Ruri to the ramen shop and proudly made his announcement. But how much could two small eaters like them really consume? At most 3 or 4 large bowls of ramen. He had enough money for that. Before Ruri could finish speaking, Ayane hesitated and said, well, Shiraishi-kun, it's better if we each pay for ourselves. It's fine, Ayane. Don't worry about my wallet. I can afford a few bowls of ramen. Shiraishi smiled nonchalantly. Ayane couldn't refuse after hearing his words. Well then, if your wallet can't handle it, let me know. I'll eat in moderation. Shiraishi looked at Ayane suspiciously, not understanding what she meant. Anyway, just eat to your heart's content. I'll pay for all the ramen tonight. After Shiraishi said this, he started ordering food and asked the owner to bring the ramen as soon as possible. The owner of Ichiraka Ramen was a man in his 30s, accompanied by his son, a handsome young man named Shouta. It had to be said that Ichiraku's ramen was truly delicious, and Shiraishi devoured 2 large bowls in no time. Then he glanced at Ruri and noticed that she had only ordered 1 bowl. After all, girls tended to have smaller appetites. Next, Shiraishi turned his attention to Ayane. He opened his mouth, but couldn't utter a word. What were those tall stacks in front of her? How much had Ayane eaten? 1, 4, 7, 9, 13. The number of empty bowls kept increasing. Shiraishi felt his heart ache. Ayane noticed the dumbfounded looks from Shiraishi and Ruri and blushed a little. She stopped eating and muttered in a barely audible voice, actually, I only eat slightly more than others. If it weren't for the towering stacks of bowls in front of Ayane, Shiraishi and Ruri might have believed her. She used to eat like this when she was young, but was it still acceptable now that she had grown up? Shiraishi couldn't help but worry about Ayane's future husband. Eating like this every day would be difficult for most people to afford. Episode 7. Copper smelting. Ever since that day, Shiraishi never casually mentioned inviting Ayane to dinner again. Because that would mean bankruptcy for him. After declaring her as the queen of gluttony. Time passed slowly, day by day. The incident with the ramen had brought the three of them closer together. After all, there was a deep bond formed by sharing meals together. Shiraishi's performance in class remained unremarkable. Compared to the 2 talented girls sitting next to him, his grades could only be described as mediocre. Another month flew by in the blink of an eye. During this month, Shiraishi grew closer to Ayane, but his bond with Ruri developed even more rapidly. Of course, it was a purely platonic friendship. After all, Ruri was the only one who knew about his hidden strength. If he were to unleash his true power, he would undoubtedly rank among the top 3 in the class. The reason for his closer relationship with Ruri was that she often sought him out after school for physical training sessions. During these training sessions, both Shiraishi and Ruri were highly satisfied with each other's exceptional skills. Although Shiraishi had limited combat experience, he could learn from Ruri. She had special tutors in the Uchiha clan who taught her fighting techniques, and she passed on these skills to Shiraishi. This allowed him to gradually improve his combat abilities through practice and mutual growth. Shiraishi's growth exceeded Ruri's expectations. Through their deepening communication, she realized that she was gradually unable to suppress Shiraishi. This was something Uchiha Ruri, the prodigy, couldn't bear. Every week, elite jounin from her family taught her combat skills. But in just a month or two, the boys she had previously overshadowed had caught up and even surpassed her, making it hard to maintain her reputation as the genius of the Uchiha clan. Thus, she needed to regain the upper hand and re-establish her dominance. She had to uphold the prestige of the Uchiha clan. "Why is your strength growing so rapidly?" Ruri asked, voicing her doubts. In her eyes, Shiraishi must be hiding some secret to achieve such rapid growth in strength. Otherwise, how could an ordinary person keep up with her without any formal training? Or perhaps the issue lay with Shiraishi himself. Huh? Shiraishi was momentarily taken aback. "I've just been practicing step by step." Impossible. If that were the case, you wouldn't be growing so quickly. "You must be hiding something," Ruri insisted. "I really have nothing to hide." "Really?" Ruri continued to regard Shiraishi with suspicion. "Well, I've been following my own training method all along." Shiraishi spoke earnestly. He truly had no hidden techniques or secrets. Ruri had taught him numerous combat skills, and he was immensely grateful for that. Without her, his progress wouldn't have been as rapid. "Your own method?" Ruri noticed a gap in her knowledge. "Yes, I have a scientifically designed exercise program that effectively improves my dynamic vision and neural response." Shiraishi answered honestly. "Then show me your scientific plan." Upon hearing Ruri's request, Shiraishi didn't hesitate. If it were someone else, he might need time to consider, but given that his progress was largely thanks to Ruri's guidance, he couldn't be stingy. He took out a small notebook from his ninja bag and handed it to Ruri. His scientific exercise plan was documented within its pages. Ruri opened the notebook and carefully examined its contents. The more she read, the more puzzled her expression became. It seemed so ordinary. Most of the training methods written by Shiraishi weren't secrets. Many of them were familiar to Ruri. Apart from a few unconventional techniques, she was already acquainted with most of them. Could simply following these exercises really lead to significant improvements in strength? A question was formed in Ruri's mind. Shiraishi could sense Ruri's doubts. His exercise plan wasn't particularly challenging in general, and most of it was easily understandable. However, he believed it to be the most scientifically sound program for the human body. But when compared to the mystical power of chakra in this world, Shiraishi couldn't help but feel that his scientific exercise plan was child's play. His program merely aimed to enhance his dynamic vision, nerve reflexes, body flexibility, and resistance to attacks. Compared to the wondrous energy of chakra, it seemed rather mundane. Shiraishi understood Ruri's skepticism. "I'm not entirely certain if following the scientific exercise plan would lead to the same rapid growth for you. The plan is adjusted based on my own physical development, and I usually need to modify it every month," Shiraishi explained. Ruri nodded in understanding. What worked for Shiraishi might not work for her. Therefore, Ruri looked at him seriously and said, "Create a training plan for me that suits my needs." She wanted to give Shiraishi's method a try and see if it truly produced results. "I can do that, but..." Shiraishi scratched his head awkwardly and hesitated to speak. "What's the matter? Don't want to do it?" Ruri's black and white eyes turned cold, a dangerous glint flashing in them. "No, that's not it. It's just that creating a scientific exercise plan for someone else requires an understanding of their physical condition. In simpler terms, it means gathering information about their body and tailoring the plan accordingly." Shiraishi's eyes flickered unnaturally as he intentionally or unintentionally glanced at Ruri's petite figure, then quickly averted his gaze as if afraid. A blush crept onto Ruri's normally indifferent face. She understood the hidden implications behind Shiraishi's words. Taking a deep breath, she stared at Shiraishi with icy eyes, as if looking at a dead man. "Come and touch." "Huh? All right. Wait, what did you just say?" Touch what? Shiraishi was dumbfounded. He thought Ruri would shy away from the request, but she surprised him by making it. Come here and touch me. But if you dare touch anywhere else, you'll die. Ruri issued a fierce threat. He felt like he was facing imminent death. In the end, Shiraishi created a scientific exercise plan for Ruri. Episode 8. The Caged Bird. Ever since that day, Shiraishi felt that his relationship with Ruri had taken a strange turn. Although on the surface, everything seemed normal, passing notes during class and training together in the evenings, Ruri seemed distant, silent, and rarely spoke. A few days passed like this. On that particular day, Shiraishi went to the academy as usual, but when the first class was about to begin, he noticed that Ayane, who usually sat to his left, hadn't arrived. This struck Shiraishi as odd. As a member of the prestigious Hyuga clan, Ayane would never skip or be late for class. It simply wasn't in line with the conduct expected of someone from a powerful clan. Just as the first class was about to end, footsteps could be heard outside the door. It was Ayane, standing alone at the doorway. Without saying a word, she bit her lip, a sense of sadness and despair enveloping her. What was even stranger was that Ayane had tied a white ribbon around her forehead, as if trying to conceal something. It was a sudden change that caught everyone's attention. Previously, Ayane would never wear such a ribbon on her forehead. The class teacher, Mr. Fujimura, glanced at Ayane, intending to reprimand her. However, upon noticing the profound despair and sadness in her eyes, he sighed softly, as if he understood something, and simply said, "Come in, just make sure not to be late next time." Ayane nodded and, under the curious and puzzled gazes of her classmates, made her way to her seat and sat down. "Good morning, Shiraishi-kun," Ayane forced a smile, trying to greet Shiraishi as usual. However, her smile seemed forced, and tears welled up in her eyes, as if they were ready to burst forth. Before he could respond, she buried her head on the table, as if ashamed of being seen in this state, afraid of being mocked and looked down upon. And indeed, the rest of the students looked at her with strange expressions, whispering and pointing, as if they were privy to some secret. However, those who were unaware of the truth were merely curious and concerned for Ayane. Shiraishi's face was filled with question marks, but he didn't ask any questions. Ruri glanced past Shiraishi, casting a brief look at Ayane, but remained silent. "Ruri, do you know what happened to Ayane?" Shiraishi wrote the question on a note and handed it to Ruri. As a member of a prestigious clan, Ruri must have some knowledge of the situation. What else could it be? It's the excellent tradition of the Hyuga clan. Ruri put the word excellent in quotation marks, indicating her sarcastic tone. The excellent tradition of the Hyuga clan? He wasn't aware of it, but Ayane's current state must be connected to this tradition that Ruri mentioned. What could it be? Unable to come up with an answer, he gave up pondering on it. At noon, Shiraishi and Ruri were eating their packed lunches together. "Hey, Ruri, what is this tradition of the Hyuga clan you mentioned?" Shiraishi couldn't help but ask out of curiosity. Ruri fell silent for a moment before responding, "This matter isn't a secret amongst ninja in the village. Most chunin and jonin in the village are aware of it. The Hyuga clan has a peculiar tradition that dates back to ancient times, an unacceptable tradition known as the division between the main and branch families." Is there something wrong with the distinction between the main and branch families? The branch family is tasked with protecting the main family, bearing the duties and responsibilities, Ruri explained. That seems normal, Shiraishi replied, unable to grasp the issue. The lower status protects the higher status. While it may not be fair, it forms the basis of a social structure. Society is built on classes and hierarchies. In Shiraishi's eyes, it was a natural progression for members of the Hyuga branch to protect those from the main family. If it were only that, it wouldn't be so rare. However, in order to ensure the complete dedication of the branch family to protect the main family and to prevent the dilution of the Hyuga bloodline, there is a predetermined destiny that controls the branch family. Control? Shiraishi was taken aback. Yes, control in the truest sense. Ruri glanced at Shiraishi and spoke seriously. For the main family's safety, the branch family willingly bears a curse seal known as the Caged Bird. It signifies that the main family holds control over the branch family's life and death. If a member of the branch family commits any misdeeds or fails to fulfill their obligations to the main family, the curse can be activated to execute them instantly. In other words, Ayane, her life and death are under the control by them. If Ayane were to show dissatisfaction or harm anyone from the main family, the clan members have the right to punish and even execute her. Shiraishi suddenly realized something and asked, "Is the curse mark located?" Yes, the mark is placed on Ayane's forehead. That's why she covered it with a cloth. Whether it's a matter of honor or the nominal protection of the main family, it ultimately means that the branch family's existence is confined. That curse mark is truly a symbol of being a slave. Shiraishi fell silent. He couldn't help but feel that Konoha like a terrorist organization, where such things were considered normal. Though he found it repulsive, Shiraishi realized that he was powerless to do anything. This was the helplessness and compromise imposed by reality. For Ayane, having a slave mark engraved on her forehead was even crueler than being killed outright. Indeed, what a dreadful era they lived in. If such matters were confined to the shadows, Shiraishi could reluctantly accept it. However, the Hyuga clan's rules were openly known. What did it mean to publicly treat the other half of one's clan as slaves, without any attempt to conceal it? At that moment, Shiraishi looked towards the rock monument in Konoha, which depicted the 3 carved figures of Hokages, symbolizing their great achievements in the village. Especially the first and second Hokage, revered by the world as the ones who ended the era of constant warfare. And what happened afterward? The wars continued. There was no discernible difference from the time of constant warfare, as children were still sent to battlefields. Nothing seemed to have changed. The only difference was that the shinobis had formed a larger village, composed of various clans, establishing a system of one country, one village. Shiraishi couldn't help but feel that their existence was filled with irony. So-called families, if they were only at this level, the Hyuga clan's tradition had been incompatible with Konoha from the very beginning. Logically speaking, such a shinobi clan shouldn't have been allowed to join the Konoha shinobi village governed by the will of fire. The tradition of this clan was a clear denial of the will of fire. If they couldn't cherish their own clan, how could they claim to have the belief to love and care for the entire village? Shiraishi questioned this matter with a big question mark. In the end, he sighed and said nothing. These days, living peacefully with Ruri had almost made him forget that he was a heretic in this village, destined to become a traitor sooner or later. But this tranquility had made him almost forget his identity as a traitor, and he couldn't help but yearn to blend into the village. At that thought, Shiraishi broke into a cold sweat. Comfort breeds complacency. From the beginning, he had never submitted himself to Konoha. He was grateful to Konoha for teaching him the ways of the ninja, but his gratitude only extended to that aspect. Episode 9. Alliance 1. In the days that followed, Shiraishi often noticed Ayane staying alone at the academy. She appeared devoid of friends or any sense of purpose, her eyes empty, resembling a walking corpse. This seemed to be the true mindset of a slave. It seemed impossible for her to escape this shadow in her lifetime. Shiraishi couldn't comprehend how a girl who clearly longed for freedom was labeled a slave by her own clan. However, he understood that it must have been a state of despair and unimaginable pain for her. After that day, Ayane's grades plummeted, and their homeroom teacher, Fujimura Taiga, said nothing about it. All he could offer was some insignificant words of comfort and encouragement, urging her to focus on her studies and not dwell on other matters. Although Fujimura Taiga genuinely wanted to help his students, he knew that the traditions of the Hyuga clan would not be altered by an academy teacher like him. He was fully aware that seeking assistance from the third Hokage was futile. These powerful families functioned like small villages within Konoha village, and many of Konoha village's regulations were beyond their control. Shiraishi had a clear understanding of this. Words of comfort were futile for Ayane. She needed to find enlightenment on a deeper level. Mental trauma could only be healed with mental medicine. Inflicting physical pain on oneself had always been an effective remedy to counter emotional numbness. By experiencing this physical pain, Ayane could truly feel alive. She reminded herself that she was a person, not a captive livestock of her family. Ayane didn't comprehend the traditional meaning of family, nor did she want to understand it. Despite the adults' attempts to enlighten her, claiming that the caged bird seal was for her own good and the preservation of the family's legacy, she couldn't help but question why it was always her making sacrifices. Her mind was filled with thoughts of destruction and a growing hatred. As her thoughts of hatred and anger intensified, her once gentle and fair face transformed into a distorted and fierce visage, devoid of its former gentleness. She attacked the training stake with the Hyuga clan's gentle fist. Gradually, her attacks became increasingly forceful, fueled by her need to vent and grow harder. Even as her fists bled and the pain persisted, Ayane showed no signs of stopping. Instead, she embraced the pain, hoping it would counter her emotional numbness. After a while, she ceased this self-destructive method of release, squatting beside the stake. Clasping her knees with both hands, she lowered her head, her long black hair concealing her face as she sobbed softly. The sun was setting, and darkness enveloped the woods. It was almost nightfall, and the forest air turned chilly. Dark green leaves fell onto Ayane's shoulders as she continued to sob quietly. Suddenly, in that moment, the sound of slow footsteps echoed through the dim woods, causing Ayane to abruptly stop crying. So, you're hiding here. This place is quite fitting for someone to lick their wounds alone. The voice was familiar to Ayane, and she raised her head to see who had arrived. It was her classmate, Chiba Shiraishi. He was an entirely ordinary person, an average student with unremarkable grades. Previously, they had a relatively harmonious relationship, but Ayane currently had no interest in paying attention to an unrelated outsider like him. Why are you here? Instead of addressing him with the gentle title of Shiraishi-kun as before, her voice turned stiff and unfamiliar. Ayane was perplexed as to why Shiraishi had come here, feeling as though he had been spying on her and discovered her secret, which angered her. There are many reasons, but I'm drawn here by the hatred and anger in your heart. In fact, I am just like you. A meaningful smile appeared on Shiraishi's face. Like me? Ayane was taken aback, struggling to grasp the meaning behind Shiraishi's words. Stepping out of the darkness, Shiraishi emerged with a faint smile in his steady black eyes. Yes, like you, I don't wish to be part of this twisted and monotonous village. Even the smallest role is considered despicable, as our fate is controlled by others. Ayane gasped for breath, surprised by Shiraishi's words. It felt as though she was rediscovering her classmate, seeing him in a new light. Was he expressing dissatisfaction and hostility towards the village? Why did he harbor such thoughts? Yet, for some reason, Ayane felt a resonating delight within her upon hearing Shiraishi's words. You find me suspicious, don't you? Shiraishi asked with a smile. Suspicious? Doubtful of what? Ayane furrowed her brow, her white eyes displaying a hint of wariness. Do you already feel inferior? Shiraishi's words instantly filled Ayane's chest with an overwhelming aura of hostility. This sentence wounded her pride and self-esteem. All the negative emotions flooded her heart, causing Ayane to lose control in an instant. She lunged at Shiraishi, throwing a punch toward him. Shiraishi smiled faintly, recognizing Ayane's attack as feeble and deceptive, a product of her anger dominating her composure. With such a level of attack, there was no need for him to be on guard. This much he understood. So, he caught Ayane's fist and swiftly countered, pinning her body against the nearby tree, rendering her immobile. The situation shifted in an instant. Perhaps the sudden defeat caught Ayane off guard, freezing her in place. She certainly hadn't expected this outcome. You've been hiding your strength. Why? Ayane turned to Shiraishi, questioning him. What's the hurry? Before we delve into that, how about we discuss your situation? Shiraishi calmly spoke in a warm voice. Humph. What would someone like you, a commoner, understand? Stop mocking me. Ayane's words carried a desire to tear at Shiraishi's throat. What could a commoner like him possibly comprehend? She had been burdened with a caged bird seal, and her entire future would be controlled and planned by those distant clans. Her freedom and dignity had been ruthlessly stripped away. Every time she glimpsed the haughty expressions of the clan members, she felt an overwhelming urge to trample upon their pride. She wished to make them experience the humiliation and despair of having their dignity and freedom manipulated. Episode 10. Alliance, 2. I must admit, I don't fully grasp the depth of your current emotional pain. Why would a family, supposedly built on love, separate its members and subject them to enslavement? And what's even more unfortunate is that you are one of those who have been enslaved. Ayane clenched her teeth and stubbornly stared at Shiraishi, unafraid. In that case, think deeply. What are your thoughts about this village? The village? To put it simply, do you believe the village is doing the right thing? Is the will of fire truly correct? Are you an idiot? Of course the will of fire is correct. It's the enduring legacy passed down by the first Hokage-sama. Ayane replied bluntly. For those who grew up in Konoha village, the first Hokage was a highly revered and remarkable ninja. He had brought an end to the conflicts during the Warring States period and established the system of one country, one village. Konoha's current glory was inseparable from the remarkable contributions of the founding Hokage. Ayane's words prompted Shiraishi to clap and applaud, seemingly appreciating her response. Indeed? The god of Nija was truly an incredible man. However, let me ask you this, if the will of fire clearly states the protection of young children, why are children under 10 years old being sent to the battlefield? Isn't that a blatant contradiction? Well. Ayane hesitated. She couldn't come up with an answer. Instead, she was left speechless. Although she wanted to refute, Shiraishi's argument seemed unassailable. After all, such incidents were happening within Konoha village. Haven't you seen the truth? Let's look at it from a different perspective. In their attempt to maintain equality and love within the village, why does your Hyuga clan's cruel tradition persist? Are you expected to love those who have labeled you as a slave? Are you supposed to consider the clan that enslaved you as family? If so, you must be truly remarkable. You shouldn't degrade yourself to such an extent. Upon hearing Shiraishi's unconventional perspective on the will of fire, Ayane's eyes became filled with complexity. Upon careful consideration, she realized that Shiraishi wasn't arguing in a twisted manner, but rather speaking the undeniable truth that was evident to all. Indeed, she had been marked with the caged bird seal and labeled a slave by her clan. What was there for the Hyuga clan to love? While preaching friendship and mutual assistance, everyone advocated the will of fire, yet they allowed the cruel traditions of the Hyuga clan to continue. Why didn't the Hokage restrict or abolish these practices? Were those who were born into separate families destined to be slaves to the clan? Were the lives and dignity of these isolated families truly so worthless? Why was this happening? Is this how a so-called family should treat its members as slaves? In that moment, Ayane only saw the heartless and ruthless side of her family. Ayane also suddenly realized how hypocritical and ridiculous the will of fire she had learned was. Gradually, everything in the village began to feel disgustingly filthy to her. What? What do you plan to do? I don't believe that you, who has hidden your true abilities in the academy, have no ulterior motive. After a brief hesitation, Ayane asked in a low voice. There is indeed a purpose, but it's an overstatement to say that I have no idea about it. In your eyes, can I be more hypocritical than the Hyuga clan and Konoha? Shiraishi smiled and responded. He couldn't agree with Ayane's assessment. He wasn't engaged in anything deceitful. He was simply revealing the truth to Ayane, helping her overcome her despair and regain her footing. And the truth he spoke couldn't be refuted by Ayane, nor was there a need to refute it. Because everything Shiraishi said was rooted in the truth. No matter how one tried to hide or throw dirt, the facts remained. Shiraishi took a step back and released his hold on Ayane's body. His calm smile conveyed an unquestionable power, instantly overwhelming Ayane's mind. I simply find this village and the world to be boring. Whether it's the ongoing war or the will of fire within the village, it's all just monotonous to me. Shiraishi didn't consider his demeanor arrogant. He was merely expressing his genuine thoughts. Although the will of fire was created by the god of ninjas, Shiraishi believed that anyone with sufficient knowledge of society would disdain this illusory and empty concept. There was nothing praiseworthy about it. Not only was the content vague, but even those who inherited the will of fire couldn't fully uphold it. This was the greatest tragedy. Ultimately, it was the differing perceptions of society, the world, and the realm of comprehension between Shiraishi and the inhabitants of the ninja world that led to this ideological deviation. So, Ayane, direct all the hatred and grievances in your heart toward me. I'm here to bear that pain with you. For now, we are the ones who truly understand the truth behind the will of fire. As he spoke in a gentle tone, Shiraishi extended his palm steadily. Ayane involuntarily reached out her hand. In that brief moment, she felt as though her future would be guided by the boy in front of her. Yet, she had no regrets. She despised her family. And now, she began to detest this village, filled with hypocrisy and emptiness. She desired to live a genuine life, one filled with flesh and blood. She refused to be anyone's slave. She wanted to live happily and freely. Shiraishi placed his other hand on Ayane's face, gently wiping away the tears from the corner of her eyes. That's it. I'll wipe away your tears. Remember, always let your hatred for the clan show in your eyes. The more you hate them, the more reassured they will be by you. Yes, I understand, Shiraishi-kun. Honestly, I didn't expect you to be such a terrible person. Ayane brushed her long black hair aside, smiling with a sigh, her face slightly flushed. Terrible? Upon hearing Ayane's remark, Shiraishi shook his head and smiled. What are you saying? I'm nothing more than an unknown person in the shinobi world. I'm not even a shinobi yet. Remember that, Ayane. Shiraishi looked up at the moon, now shining in the night sky. The moonlight was gentle and serene, casting a warm radiance upon the dark woods. The moonlight tonight is truly beautiful. It seems tomorrow will be a sunny day. Yes,